The following presentation is intended strictly for educational and entertainment purposes and must not be construed as professional financial, legal, academic, or career advice. The data, strategies, and historical trends discussed regarding higher education funding, scholarships, grants, and student loans are based on publicly available information and independent analysis. The landscape of educational finance in the United States is complex, highly variable, and subject to continuous changes in federal legislation, state-level budgetary allocations, and private institutional policies. We do not provide personalized financial counseling or guarantee any specific outcomes, as individual results will vary drastically based on academic performance, demographic profiling, geographic location, and the specific application strategies employed. The potential outcomes and case studies presented in this masterclass are entirely illustrative. Furthermore, navigating the financial aid system involves inherent risks, including the potential for scholarship displacement, where winning an outside scholarship may result in the reduction of institutional financial aid. Viewers are strongly cautioned against relying solely on the information provided herein to make binding financial decisions. You must conduct your own rigorous due diligence and consult with a certified financial planner, an accredited college admissions counselor, or a registered financial aid advisor to assess your unique circumstances before signing any promissory notes, student loan agreements, or committing to any educational institution. Right now in the United States, we are watching a silent economic catastrophe unfold in real time, and it is entirely built on a mathematical illusion that has been sold to American families for the last 4 decades. You have been told that a college degree is the ultimate equalizer, the undisputed ticket to the middle class, and the only logical step after high school graduation. But what they conveniently failed to mention during those mandatory high school assemblies and glossy campus tours is that the system is structurally designed to extract maximum capital from the middle class through highly predatory lending vehicles. We are currently sitting on over $1.7 trillion of outstanding student loan debt, a staggering figure that is crippling an entire generation, delaying homeownership, stalling business creation, and forcing millions into decades of severe financial paralysis. But here is the most controversial truth that financial aid offices absolutely do not want you to know. While millions of students are casually signing away their financial futures on high-interest federal and private loans, an estimated $100 million in private scholarship money goes completely unclaimed every single year. Yes, you heard that correctly. While students are mortgaging their futures to afford tuition, room and board, massive corporate endowments, local community foundations, and private philanthropic trusts are literally struggling to find qualified applicants to take their money. This phenomenon happens because the current educational system relies entirely on your exhaustion. By the time you finish standardized testing, completing complex college applications, and filling out the notoriously tedious free application for federal student aid, you are simply too depleted to look for the secondary market of funding. Furthermore, you have likely bought into the greatest, most pervasive myth in the American education system: the belief that scholarships are exclusively reserved for valedictorians, recognized prodigies, and elite Division I athletes. This misconception is systematically keeping you poor. The reality is that the vast majority of available educational capital is distributed based on highly specific, obscure criteria that have absolutely nothing to do with having a perfect 4.0 grade point average or being the captain of the state championship debate team. There are thousands of scholarships exclusively reserved for students who want to study the science of supply chain logistics, students who are descendants of specific historical populations, students interested in niche manufacturing sectors, and students who have simply demonstrated resilience in the face of unique personal or medical challenges. The money is sitting there right now, locked away in decentralized databases and community trust funds, but you are not finding it because you are looking in the exact same crowded, highly competitive places as the other 3 million high school seniors graduating this year. You are treating scholarship hunting like a lottery, submitting generic essays to massive aggregator websites where your application becomes a mere statistical anomaly among hundreds of thousands of desperate candidates. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand exactly why your current approach is failing miserably, and I am going to reveal a highly systematic, analytical framework for locating and securing the hidden pools of capital that are currently sitting idle across the country. The core problem you are facing right now is not a lack of available funding. It is an absolute lack of asymmetrical information and strategic targeting. Today, we are going to completely dismantle your current understanding of college financing and rebuild it from the ground up using a precise, data-driven methodology. This masterclass is designed to solve the exact problem of how to navigate the intentionally opaque, deeply fragmented ecosystem of United States higher education scholarships. We are going to move far beyond the superficial advice of simply telling you to apply early, volunteer at a local charity, and write a compelling essay. Instead, you are going to learn how to operate exactly like a professional institutional researcher. I will break down the specific structural differences between institutional merit aid, departmental endowments, private corporate sponsorships, and hyperlocal community foundation grants, detailing the historical trends of how these distinct funds are distributed year over year. You will learn how to identify high-probability, low-competition funding sources that perfectly align with your unique demographic profile, your intended major, and your highly specific regional location. We are going to examine real-world case studies of how strategic applicants bypass the massive, practically useless scholarship search engines entirely. You will see how they opt instead to aggressively mine local Chamber of Commerce directories, professional association registries, union websites, and specific university departmental pages to find money that is virtually unadvertised to the general public. Moreover, we will dissect the critical, hidden timeline of the scholarship lifecycle. I will show you exactly when these private organizations set their philanthropic budgets and open their application windows, which is almost always months before the average high school senior even thinks to start looking. We will even dive into advanced tactics like how to legally analyze the public tax returns, specifically Form 990s, of nonprofit organizations to see exactly how much scholarship money they are required to give away annually by law. You will thoroughly understand the dangerous concept of scholarship displacement and how to aggressively, yet professionally, negotiate with the university's financial aid office to ensure that the outside money you win actually reduces your real out-of-pocket costs, rather than simply replacing the grant money the university was already prepared to offer you. By the time we conclude this intensive masterclass, you will no longer be randomly guessing, passively hoping, or relying on sheer luck. You will possess a comprehensive step-by-step blueprint for building a highly targeted, localized scholarship portfolio, allowing you to systematically apply for, compete for, and potentially secure the capital necessary to fund your higher education without signing your financial freedom away to a student loan servicer. This is fundamentally about taking absolute control of your financial destiny before you even step foot in a university lecture hall. The first fundamental shift you must make right now in your educational funding strategy is completely abandoning the national lottery mentality that traps millions of students every single year. When the average high school senior or current college student decides they need financial assistance, their immediate reflex is to open a web browser and type the word scholarships into a search engine. This action inevitably routes them to massive, well-known aggregator platforms and national databases. You create a user profile, input your grade point average, list your intended academic major, check a few boxes regarding your extracurricular activities, and the platform algorithm instantly generates a list of 300 potential matches. This process feels highly productive. It creates the illusion that you are actively making progress toward your financial goals. But we must examine the historical trends and actual data behind these massive platforms. When a $2,000 essay contest is advertised on a national database to every single high school senior across the United States, that individual application might receive 40,000 to 60,000 submissions. The mathematical reality is that your statistical probability of securing that specific funding drops to near zero, regardless of how compelling your personal narrative might be or how pristine your academic record is. You are essentially entering a highly congested sweepstakes, paying for your entry with your own time. In the context of educational finance, time is the single most valuable asset you possess, and squandering it on high competition, low probability targets is a critical strategic error. To experience entirely different potential outcomes in your funding journey, you must pivot your focus aggressively to the hyper-local level. The capital that is actually attainable, the funds with historically low application rates and high yield probabilities, are sitting right now in your own zip code, your surrounding county, and your specific state of residence. We refer to this exact methodology as the geographic isolation strategy. Let us look at a practical application of this concept. Imagine if a high school senior named Marcus, living in a mid-sized suburb of Atlanta in this current year of 2026, decides to ignore the massive national scholarship search engines completely. Instead of competing against students in California and New York for the exact same pool of money, Marcus targets the community foundations located within a strict 50-mile radius of his home. Community foundations are highly specific philanthropic organizations designed explicitly to pool local regional wealth and distribute it directly back into the surrounding local area. By utilizing directories like the Council on Foundations, Marcus discovers the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. Unlike national databases, this localized foundation manages dozens of individual, highly segmented scholarship funds that have been established by local affluent families, deceased community members leaving a legacy, and regional businesses. Because these specific funds legally require the applicant to be a verified resident of specific Georgia counties, or even a graduating senior from a specific designated high school, the applicant pool immediately shrinks from 60,000 national students down to perhaps 50 or 60 local students. Marcus identifies and applies for a localized memorial scholarship strictly dedicated to students pursuing environmental science from his specific county district. He ultimately competes against only 12 other individuals. He secures a $4,000 disbursement. This outcome is not a product of luck or exceptional genius. This is the calculated, systematic exploitation of geographical constraints. To replicate these potential outcomes, you must systematically map and audit your local economic and social ecosystem. The very first step in this operational framework is visiting the official website of your local municipal chamber of commerce. The Chamber of Commerce serves as the central networking hub for local business owners and regional corporate entities. Many of these local businesses establish small educational grants, typically ranging from $500 to $2,000, as a direct form of community goodwill, brand building, and corporate tax deduction. These businesses generally do not possess the marketing budgets required to advertise these opportunities on national platforms, nor do they have the desire to do so. Their explicit mandate is to keep their capital within the local economy by funding a local student. You must meticulously comb through your regional chamber directory to identify the local credit unions, the regional utility cooperatives, the prominent local law firms, and the large specialized medical practices operating in your town. Credit unions are particularly valuable targets within this framework because they are structured as member-owned financial cooperatives. Historical trends consistently demonstrate that regional credit unions allocate significant educational grants exclusively to the children of their existing members or to high school seniors residing within their specific operating footprint. If your family maintains a checking account or an auto loan at a local credit union, you automatically possess access to a highly restricted applicant pool that the general public cannot touch. The exact same principle applies to your local utility providers. The company that provides electricity, water, or broadband internet to your specific neighborhood often manages an educational foundation. They frequently deploy localized scholarships for students entering science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields in order to proactively build a future workforce pipeline for their own industry. Furthermore, your localized strategy must include a rigorous audit of the civic, fraternal, and community service organizations actively operating within your county limits. Organizations such as the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, the Elks Lodge, the Kiwanis Club, and the American Legion are deeply embedded in the historical fabric of American municipalities. A core pillar of their operational mission and tax-exempt status revolves around youth development and educational advancement. These groups host annual community events entirely to fund their local scholarship endowments. However, there is a critical operational data point regarding these organizations that gives you a massive asymmetric advantage. These civic chapters are frequently managed by older demographics who do not aggressively digitize their application processes. You will very rarely find a sleek, mobile-optimized application portal for a local Lions Club grant. Instead, you might have to physically telephone the chapter president, attend a local community meeting, or print out a paper application document and send it through the physical postal service. This slight increase in application friction is your greatest strategic weapon. The modern student is conditioned to apply for things with a single click. Every extra manual step required to complete an application naturally eliminates a massive percentage of your competition, leaving the available funds wide open for those willing to execute the manual labor. This hyper-local strategy forms the absolute bedrock of building a resilient, diversified scholarship portfolio. By geographically isolating your targets, you mathematically increase your probability of securing funding. But localized community money is merely the first layer of the decentralized educational funding ecosystem. Once you have thoroughly exhausted your regional geographic radius, you must learn how to weaponize the exact career path you intend to pursue in order to unlock massive, multi-million-dollar corporate endowments. Right now, there is a specific sector of the United States economy experiencing a catastrophic, heavily documented labor shortage. As a direct result, massive multinational corporations are deploying unprecedented amounts of capital, offering full tuition coverage, guaranteed paid internships, and comprehensive living stipends to high school and college students just to convince them to enter their industry. These massive corporate funds are completely hidden deep within corporate career pages, bypassing the financial aid system entirely. And you are about to discover the exact step-by-step methodology required to intercept this corporate capital and divert it directly toward your own university tuition. The modern American labor market is currently experiencing a profound structural realignment. As we navigate through this current year of 2026, entire sectors of the domestic economy are facing an unprecedented demographic cliff. A massive generation of highly skilled workers, specifically in fields like advanced manufacturing, civil engineering, supply chain logistics, aviation, and specialized healthcare, is rapidly retiring. This massive exit is leaving a void that traditional college recruitment pipelines simply cannot fill fast enough. To combat this operational crisis, multinational corporations and massive industry conglomerates have completely altered their talent acquisition strategies. They are no longer waiting for students to graduate and magically appear at their corporate headquarters with a polished resume. Instead, historical trends over the last 5 years show these entities moving their recruitment funnels upstream directly into high schools and undergraduate programs. They are deploying millions of dollars in educational capital, not as philanthropic charity, but as a calculated, high-yield investment to secure their future workforce. When a major aerospace manufacturer or a global logistics firm offers a $10,000 scholarship to a sophomore studying industrial engineering, they are securing early access to top-tier talent for a fraction of what it would cost to recruit that same individual through traditional corporate headhunting channels 3 years later. To intercept this institutional wealth, you must completely stop acting like a desperate student begging for financial aid and start positioning yourself as a highly valuable future asset to these specific industries. This requires a precise step-by-step operational framework centered entirely on professional associations and industry-specific trade groups. Imagine if a college freshman named Sarah, studying cybersecurity in Texas in 2026, decides she needs funding. If Sarah goes to a massive national database and applies for a generic Women in Technology scholarship, her potential outcomes are statistically bleak because she is competing against tens of thousands of other, highly qualified applicants from across the country. However, if Sarah shifts her strategy and targets the specific professional associations governing her niche industry, the entire mathematical equation flips in her favor. She identifies organizations like the Information Systems Security Association or the American Society for Industrial Security. These organizations exist specifically to advance their respective professions, and they are heavily funded by corporate sponsorships from major defense contractors and technology firms. Almost every single one of these professional associations operates a dedicated educational foundation, specifically designed to distribute capital to students entering their exact field. The step-by-step methodology to secure this funding requires aggressive digital reconnaissance. First, you must identify the exact professional associations aligned with your intended major or future career path. Do not search for broad terms like business scholarships. You must be hyper-specific. If you want to study accounting, you search for the State Society of Certified Public Accountants in your specific geographic region. If you are pursuing agriculture, you target the National Associations for Crop Science or Agricultural Economics. Once you locate the official website of the association, you do not look at their homepage. You navigate directly to the sections labeled Student Resources, Foundation, or Early Career Development. This is where the capital is hidden. These associations frequently offer incredibly lucrative funding packages because their applicant pools are drastically limited. The only people applying for a scholarship from the American Society of Civil Engineers are students who specifically know about that society and are actively pursuing civil engineering. This natural barrier to entry eliminates 99% of the general student population, who are too busy fighting over scraps on massive aggregator websites. Furthermore, when you examine the applications for these industry-specific funds, you will notice a drastic departure from the traditional academic scholarship model. These organizations generally do not care about a perfect standardized test score or your participation in the high school drama club. They are evaluating your technical aptitude, your demonstrated interest in their specific field, and your long-term career trajectory. They want to know that if they invest $5,000 into your education today, you are actually going to enter their industry and contribute to their economic sector tomorrow. Therefore, your application strategy must mirror their corporate objectives. You must study their annual reports, understand the current challenges facing their industry, and explicitly state in your application essays exactly how your education will help solve those specific industry problems. Case studies of successful applicants consistently demonstrate that students who align their personal academic goals with the macroeconomic goals of the funding organization experience significantly higher success rates. You are essentially writing a business proposal, pitching yourself as the solution to their future labor shortage. Beyond the professional associations, you must also directly audit the corporate career pages of the massive companies operating within your chosen sector. Many Fortune 500 companies have quietly launched massive educational funding initiatives that bypass university financial aid offices entirely. They are offering full tuition reimbursement programs, significant housing stipends, and guaranteed paid summer internships to students who agree to work for them for a specified number of years after graduation. This is essentially a modern corporate sponsorship model, and it is actively funding the education of thousands of students across the country right now. You locate these opportunities by identifying the top 10 largest employers in your intended industry, navigating to the career or early talent sections of their corporate websites, and meticulously reviewing their student initiatives. You now understand how to extract capital from your local geographic radius and how to intercept massive corporate investments by leveraging your intended career path. You have built a foundational understanding of the visible funding ecosystem. However, the most sophisticated strategy in educational financing involves locating the invisible capital. There are billions of dollars locked inside private philanthropic trusts and private family foundations that do not have websites, do not advertise on social media, and actively avoid public attention. Yet, federal law dictates that these organizations must distribute a specific percentage of their massive wealth every single year or face severe tax penalties. In the next phase of this masterclass, you are going to learn a highly advanced, completely legal investigative technique to access their mandatory public tax filings, specifically the Internal Revenue Service Form 990, allowing you to systematically track down exactly who holds this wealth, exactly how much money they are legally forced to give away this year, and exactly where you need to send your application to claim it before the deadline expires. The document you are looking for is called the Internal Revenue Service Form 990 picofarads, which stands for Private Foundation. To understand the sheer magnitude of this hidden financial ecosystem, you must first understand the strict federal laws that govern philanthropic wealth in the United States. When an affluent family, a successful entrepreneur, or a corporate entity establishes a private foundation or a charitable trust, they receive massive immediate tax deductions from the federal government. However, the Internal Revenue Service does not hand out these tax shelters for free. In exchange for these lucrative tax benefits, federal law dictates that private foundations must distribute a minimum of 5% of their net investment assets every single year in the form of charitable grants, which heavily includes educational scholarships. If they fail to distribute this exact minimum percentage by the end of their fiscal year, they face severe financial penalties and risk losing their tax-exempt status entirely. This creates a fascinating historical trend that works massively in your favor. These private foundations are legally forced to give their money away. They are highly motivated to find qualified students to take their capital, but because they are private entities, they frequently do not possess the infrastructure, the marketing departments, or the desire to publicly advertise their existence. They do not have sleek websites, they do not run digital ad campaigns, and they absolutely do not list their funds on massive national scholarship aggregator platforms. They operate quietly, often managed by a local bank trust department, a regional law firm, or a small board of family members. Because these organizations are invisible to the traditional search engine algorithms, 99% of students and parents have absolutely no idea they even exist. This is where your strategy shifts from passive searching to active forensic accounting. To access this hidden capital, you must utilize free, publicly available transparency databases designed specifically to track nonprofit organizations. Websites like ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer or Candid GuideStar warehouse millions of these tax returns, making them fully searchable by the general public. Your step-by-step methodology begins by accessing one of these databases and utilizing their advanced search functions. You will not search for the word scholarship. Instead, you will search for specific legal designations combined with your geographic location. You will input terms like educational trust, memorial foundation, or scholarship fund. Cross-reference with your specific city, your county, or your state. This targeted query will instantly bypass the highly competitive national programs and generate a localized list of private foundations operating right in your backyard. Let us look at a highly specific case study to demonstrate the potential outcomes of this advanced strategy. Imagine if a high school senior named David, living in a suburban county in Michigan in this current year of 2026, decides to implement this exact forensic approach. David bypasses all the traditional college counseling advice and goes straight to the ProPublica database. He searches for the term educational trust restricted to his specific Michigan zip code and the surrounding 3 counties. The database returns a list of 25 distinct private foundations. One of them is listed as the Harrison Family Memorial Trust. David searches for this trust on the internet and finds absolutely nothing. There is no website, no social media presence, and no mention of them in his high school guidance office. Most students would stop right there and assume the fund is inactive. Instead, David downloads the most recent Form 990 picofarads tax return for the Harrison Family Memorial Trust directly from the database. This is where the true masterclass begins. When you open a Form 990 picofarads, it looks like a dense, intimidating financial document, but you only need to know how to read one specific section. You will scroll directly to Part 15, titled Supplementary Information. This single page is the greatest hidden goldmine in the entire educational finance sector. Part 15 legally requires the foundation to disclose exactly how a student can apply for their money. Under line 2 of this section, David finds the exact name and physical mailing address of the individual who manages the trust. On the next line, he finds the precise formatting requirements for the application, which in this case simply asks for a 1-page letter detailing his academic goals, a copy of his high school transcript, and proof of residency in his specific county. The document also lists the strict submission deadline. But the most critical piece of intelligence is found at the very end of the tax return, where the foundation is legally required to list every single grant they distributed in the previous year. David looks at the grantee list and sees that last year, the Harrison Family Memorial Trust distributed exactly 6 scholarships of $5,000 each, entirely to students from his immediate geographic area. David has just uncovered a $30,000 annual funding pool that has literally zero public competition. Because the application requires a physical letter mailed to a local law office, the friction naturally eliminates the thousands of students who only apply for digital scholarships with a single click. David writes a highly tailored, professional letter addressing the specific goals of the trust, mails it with his transcript, and because the applicant pool is historically limited to only the handful of local students who possess this forensic knowledge, his probability of securing that $5,000 disbursement is exponentially higher than any national sweepstakes. This is the exact data-driven methodology required to systematically audit your local community for hidden wealth. You are no longer guessing. You are using federal tax records to identify the exact administrators holding the capital, the precise amount they are mandated to distribute, and the exact instructions required to intercept it. You must repeat this exact process for every single foundation and trust you identify in your regional audit, building a massive spreadsheet of hidden targets. However, identifying the money and even winning the award is only half the battle. Once you secure these private funds, you are going to encounter a deeply controversial and highly secretive practice utilized by almost every major university financial aid office in the United States. It is a predatory mathematical maneuver designed to take the private scholarship money you just worked so hard to win and use it to benefit the university rather than reducing your actual out-of-pocket costs. If you do not understand how this mechanism works, your entire forensic strategy will be rendered completely useless, and you will still end up signing away your future to student loans. You must learn exactly how to anticipate, identify, and aggressively negotiate against this institutional trap before you accept a single dollar of private funding. The institutional trap you are walking into is a deeply controversial practice known formally within the higher education sector as scholarship displacement. To understand the sheer gravity of this maneuver, you must fundamentally understand how universities calculate your financial aid package. When you complete your federal applications in this current year of 2026, the government generates a specific metric known as your Student Aid Index. The university subtracts this index from their total cost of attendance to determine your demonstrated financial need. Let us look at the mathematical reality of historical trends. If a university costs $50,000 a year, and your index determines your family can afford $10,000, you have $40,000 of demonstrated need. The University Financial Aid Office will typically attempt to meet this need through a carefully constructed package consisting of institutional grants, which is free money from the university, and self-help aid, which consists of federal student loans and work-study requirements. They might offer you $30,000 in institutional grants and package the remaining $10,000 as a high-interest federal loan. You receive this letter, realize you still have a $10,000 funding gap, and you immediately deploy the forensic localized strategy we just discussed. You work tirelessly, you identify a hidden private trust, you submit a flawless application, and you successfully secure a $10,000 outside scholarship. You naturally assume that you will apply this $10,000 private check directly to your outstanding loan balance, effectively wiping out your debt and allowing you to attend the university for exactly what your family can afford. This is precisely where the mathematical illusion shatters. When you diligently report this $10,000 private scholarship to the University Financial Aid Office, as federal regulations strictly require you to do, the university recalculates your package. But instead of replacing your $10,000 in student loans, the university systematically reduces their own institutional grant from $30,000 down to $20,000. They take the private money you worked relentlessly to secure and use it to replenish their own institutional endowment. You are still legally obligated to take out the exact same $10,000 in federal student loans. You have gained absolutely zero financial ground. The local community foundation essentially just wrote a $10,000 check directly to a multi-billion-dollar university endowment, entirely bypassing your actual financial needs. This practice is entirely legal in the vast majority of the country. It is standard operating procedure at hundreds of elite private and public institutions, and it affects hundreds of thousands of students annually, effectively punishing them for their own hard work and financial initiative. Imagine if a high school senior named Jessica, living in a rural district in Ohio in 2026, successfully navigates the professional association framework we outlined earlier. She secures a prestigious, highly competitive $5,000 engineering grant from a national manufacturing conglomerate. She is ecstatic, believing she just saved her family $5,000 in out-of-pocket costs. She forwards the award letter to her chosen university, only to log into her student portal 3 weeks later and witness her university-sponsored merit grant digitally erased and replaced by the corporate funds. The sheer psychological devastation of this realization derails countless students every single academic cycle. The financial aid officers will politely point to complex federal overaward regulations to justify this displacement, claiming they are legally prohibited from allowing your total aid to exceed your official cost of attendance. While the federal overaward limit is a real regulation, the explicit choice of which specific type of aid they reduce first, the free grant money versus the expensive loan money, is almost always a strict institutional policy decision. To navigate these potential outcomes and protect your private capital, you must implement a highly structured, professional negotiation framework before you ever officially accept an offer of admission. The first phase of this framework is the preemptive policy audit. You must contact the financial aid office of every single university on your target list and directly request their official, written outside scholarship policy. You are looking for an institution that explicitly states in writing that they will use outside funding to reduce unmet need and self-help aid, meaning loans and work study, before they ever touch your institutional grants. In recent years, due to massive public outcry and dedicated student advocacy, historical trends show that several states, including Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Washington, have legally banned or heavily restricted the practice of scholarship displacement for students attending their state-funded public universities. If you reside in one of these progressive jurisdictions, you possess a massive legislative shield. But if you are targeting private institutions or out-of-state universities where displacement runs rampant, you must move to the second phase of the strategy, which is the restrictive clause leverage. When you win a scholarship from a local community foundation or a private family trust, you are dealing directly with the individuals who control the capital. Universities are highly bureaucratic, but local foundations are personal. Before the foundation actually mails the physical check to your university bursar office, you must proactively contact the foundation director. You will professionally explain the concept of scholarship displacement and request that they attach a highly specific, legally binding restrictive clause to the financial disbursement. This written stipulation must explicitly state that the enclosed funds are strictly designated to reduce the student's self-help aid, specifically their outstanding student loans and federal work-study obligations. The clause must further dictate that if the university chooses to reduce the student's institutional grant aid as a result of this check, the funds are immediately rendered void and must be returned in full to the private foundation. Universities operate as massive financial entities, and the absolute last thing a university financial aid director wants to do is physically return a cleared check to a private donor. By weaponizing the original intent of the private foundation against the predatory policies of the university, case studies repeatedly show that financial aid offices will frequently grant a one-time administrative exception and apply the private capital exactly where you need it, effectively erasing your loan burden and securing your financial freedom. You now possess the complete operational blueprint to geographically isolate hidden funding, intercept massive corporate wealth, legally extract data from federal tax returns to find invisible private trusts, and professionally negotiate against institutional scholarship displacement to protect every single dollar you win. You have the ultimate map to the capital. However, possessing the map is entirely useless if you do not know how to unlock the vault once you arrive. The final barrier standing between you and hundreds of thousands of dollars in educational funding is the actual application review committee. These boards are composed of highly critical, thoroughly exhausted individuals who read thousands of desperately written, painfully generic essays every single application cycle. If your essay reads like a standard high school English assignment, your entire strategic framework collapses immediately. In the next phase of this comprehensive masterclass, we are going completely behind closed doors to dissect the exact psychological triggers and specific narrative architectures you must meticulously embed within your application materials. You are going to learn how to ethically manipulate the standard grading rubrics used by these private foundations, effectively forcing the review committee to view your application not merely as a request for financial charity, but as the single most compelling philanthropic investment opportunity of their entire fiscal year. The fundamental error that 99% of applicants make when approaching a scholarship essay is viewing it as a standardized academic assignment. You have been conditioned by years of high school English classes to write structurally perfect, deeply personal narratives that chronicle your personal growth. You submit essays detailing your financial hardships, your passion for your chosen major, and your general desire to make the world a better place. You must understand the historical trends of philanthropic giving to realize why this approach fails catastrophically at the highest levels of educational funding. Private foundations, community trusts, and corporate endowments are not managed by high school literature teachers. They are governed by boards of directors consisting of wealth managers, retired corporate executives, local business owners, and estate attorneys. These individuals spend their entire professional lives evaluating risk, analyzing market data, and projecting future returns. When they sit down to review a stack of 500 scholarship applications, they are not looking for the most tragic story or the most beautifully constructed prose. They are conducting a rigorous risk assessment. They view their scholarship endowment as an investment portfolio, and they are actively searching for the applicant who represents the highest probability of yielding a massive return on their philanthropic capital. If you present a narrative that solely highlights your personal financial deficit, you might temporarily trigger their human sympathy. But sympathy is a fleeting emotion that very rarely results in a five-figure financial disbursement. To secure this level of funding, you must completely abandon the traditional hardship narrative and adopt what professional grant writers call the return on investment architectural framework. The return on investment framework requires you to completely shift the psychological focus of your application away from your past struggles and precisely align it with the future strategic objectives of the funding organization. You are no longer asking for money to solve your personal problems. You are offering your future career as the ultimate macroscopic solution to their industry problems. The step-by-step execution of this strategy begins long before you write a single word of your essay. You must conduct a ruthless operational audit of the organization offering the capital. You must locate their official mission statement, read their annual letters to shareholders or donors, and identify the exact socioeconomic or industrial bottleneck they are trying to solve in the free market. Are they trying to increase technological literacy in rural communities? Are they attempting to build a reliable pipeline of future civic leaders? Are they focused entirely on expanding sustainable agricultural practices in the Midwest? Once you identify their core institutional objective, your entire essay must be meticulously engineered to prove that investing in your specific university education is the fastest, most mathematically efficient vehicle for them to achieve their own corporate goals. You are effectively writing a localized business proposal where you are the primary product. You must clearly articulate exactly what you are going to study, precisely how that specific degree translates into a tangible career, and exactly how that career will directly benefit the exact demographic or industry the foundation is desperately trying to stimulate. Let us examine a highly specific case study to observe the potential outcomes of this architectural framework in action. Imagine if a college sophomore named Michael, studying supply chain management at a state university in Illinois in this current year of 2026, decides to apply for a specialized $5,000 grant offered by a regional logistics and transportation association. The standard applicant will write a generic essay discussing how much they love the fast-paced nature of global logistics, how hard they have worked to maintain their grade point average, and how the $5,000 will alleviate the severe financial burden on their family. This essay will be immediately discarded into the rejection pile because it offers absolutely no tangible future value to the association. Michael, however, deploys the return on investment framework. He analyzes the current state of the Illinois logistics sector and identifies a massive, documented industry crisis regarding the optimization of last-mile delivery systems in suburban markets. Michael writes an essay explicitly detailing how his current coursework in predictive analytics is specifically preparing him to solve this exact operational bottleneck. He outlines a highly specific 5-year career trajectory, stating his absolute intention to remain in the Illinois region after graduation to work for a mid-sized regional distributor. He mathematically projects how his specific technical skill set will help local companies reduce overhead fuel costs and decrease their carbon footprint. He does not ask for charity. He offers the review committee a highly strategic opportunity to fund a future industry leader who is dedicated to solving the exact operational nightmares keeping their board members awake at night. Michael secures the funding because he eliminated the risk of the investment and presented a perfectly aligned future vision. To further eliminate risk and trigger the psychological illusion of safety within the review committee, you must fundamentally change the vocabulary you use to describe your past achievements. You can no longer rely on qualitative adjectives. You must communicate exclusively through quantitative metrics and hard data. When a student writes that they were heavily involved in organizing a local community food drive, the review committee has absolutely no metric to measure the actual economic impact of that labor. It sounds pleasant, but it does not demonstrate systemic operational capacity. You must translate your high school experiences into the definitive language of corporate success. Instead of stating you helped at a food bank, you must state that you engineered a localized logistics routing system for a regional food bank, directly managing a team of 12 volunteers, which resulted in a 20% measurable decrease in perishable food waste over a consecutive 6-month period. You are taking the exact same high school experience and wrapping it in the authoritative, data-driven vocabulary of a seasoned project manager. You must audit every single extracurricular item on your resume and attach a definitive number, a specific percentage, or a measurable historical trend to it. Did you tutor younger students? No, you designed and implemented an after-school peer mentorship program that increased standardized testing scores for 15 underclassmen by an average of 12%. By quantifying your past behavior, you provide the committee with the undeniable empirical evidence they need to mathematically justify their financial investment in your future. You have now learned how to locate the hidden capital, negotiate against institutional displacement, and engineer a flawless, mathematically undeniable application package. But there is a final, highly critical gauntlet you must survive for the most lucrative, full-ride private scholarships. The moment your written application is approved, these massive foundations will summon you for a formal, high-stakes interview process. This is where 80% of highly qualified candidates completely collapse under the pressure because they are expecting a casual conversation with a friendly academic counselor. In the next phase of this masterclass, we are going to completely deconstruct the corporate interrogation tactics utilized by elite private foundations, and you will learn the exact psychological framework required to dominate the room, control the narrative timeline, and walk out of that boardroom with a finalized, legally binding financial commitment. The moment you walk into the boardroom for a high-stakes scholarship interview, you must immediately abandon the psychological posture of a subordinate student seeking permission to succeed. The individuals sitting across the polished mahogany table are not your high school guidance counselors, and they are not interested in a pleasant, low-stakes conversation about your favorite extracurricular activities. These are highly sophisticated capital allocators. They are corporate executives, senior partners at regional law firms, and directors of multi-million-dollar philanthropic trusts. When they summon you for a final interview, it means your written application has already proven that you possess the mathematical aptitude and the baseline qualifications required for their investment. The interview is not designed to rehash your grade point average. The interview is a carefully engineered stress test. They are evaluating your executive presence, your emotional regulation under pressure, and your ability to articulate your future value proposition in real time. If you walk into that room expecting a friendly dialogue and default to rambling about your childhood dreams, historical trends consistently demonstrate that you will be politely dismissed, and the capital will be awarded to the candidate who treated the interaction like a high-level corporate boardroom pitch. To secure the most lucrative, full-ride private scholarships available in this current year of 2026, you must master the framework of narrative dominance. This begins the exact second the committee chair opens the interview with the most deceptively dangerous prompt in the entire professional world. They will look at you and simply say, "Tell us about yourself." 99% of applicants absolutely collapse at this exact moment. They chronologically recite their entire biography, starting from middle school, meandering through their current class schedule, and ending with a vague hope for the future. This unstructured data dump instantly signals to the committee that you lack strategic focus. You must understand that "tell us about yourself" is not a request for your life story. It is a test of your ability to synthesize complex information and deliver a targeted value proposition. You must respond with a highly engineered, 60-second thesis statement that immediately establishes your professional trajectory and aligns perfectly with the foundation's core mission. You do not talk about your hobbies. You clearly state your intended industry, the specific technical skills you are currently acquiring, and the exact macroeconomic problem you intend to solve within their sector over the next decade. By delivering a razor-sharp, future-focused thesis right out of the gate, you immediately seize control of the narrative timeline. You are no longer reacting to their questions. You are forcing them to engage with your specific vision of the future. Imagine if a high school senior named James, living in an industrial sector of Pennsylvania in 2026, secures an interview for a massive $60,000 workforce development grant funded by a consortium of regional manufacturing conglomerates. When the committee chair asks James to introduce himself, James does not mention his high school robotics club or his weekend job. Instead, James looks directly at the board and states that he is an incoming mechanical engineering student, specifically focused on integrating artificial intelligence into legacy manufacturing supply chains. He states that he has spent the last year analyzing the critical efficiency losses in Pennsylvania's steel processing facilities and intends to dedicate his career to modernizing regional production infrastructure to compete in the global market. In less than 45 seconds, James has completely transformed the dynamic of the room. He is no longer a high school student asking for tuition money. He is a highly motivated, industry-specific problem solver, offering a direct solution to the exact operational crises that these corporate executives deal with every single day. The committee is no longer interviewing a child. They are evaluating a future industry asset. Once you establish this narrative dominance, you must anticipate and neutralize their interrogation tactics. The review committee will deliberately ask you highly critical, stress-inducing questions designed to expose your weaknesses and test your resilience. They might challenge your lack of practical experience, question a specific blemish on your academic transcript, or aggressively interrogate the feasibility of your stated career goals. The amateur applicant becomes defensive, makes excuses, or attempts to shift the blame. The professional applicant utilizes a psychological technique known as the pivot and bridge. When confronted with a perceived weakness, you must acknowledge the data point without emotion and immediately pivot the conversation toward a measurable, historical trend of your own personal growth and operational adaptability. If they question your lower grades in a specific mathematics course during your sophomore year, you do not make excuses about a difficult teacher. You state clearly that the academic challenge exposed a flaw in your foundational study mechanics, which you subsequently corrected by seeking advanced tutoring and completely restructuring your analytical workflow, resulting in a 20% grade increase the following semester. You take their attack and instantly weaponize it to prove your capacity for rapid iteration and problem solving. You are showing them that when their financial investment inevitably encounters friction in the real world, you possess the psychological fortitude to adapt and overcome, rather than collapse and quit. The final, most critical phase of the boardroom interview occurs in the last 5 minutes. The committee will inevitably ask if you have any questions for them. The vast majority of applicants politely decline, thank the committee for their time, and walk out the door. This is a catastrophic strategic failure. This is your final opportunity to demonstrate executive-level thinking and completely separate yourself from the massive applicant pool. You must ask highly structural, industry-specific questions that force the committee members to defend their own corporate strategies. You ask them about the historical trends of their foundation's impact. You ask them what specific metrics they use to measure the success of their philanthropic investments over a 10-year horizon. You ask them what they believe is the single greatest threat to their specific industry within the next 5 years, and how they expect their scholarship recipients to mitigate that threat. By interviewing the interviewers, you elevate your status from a subordinate applicant to an intellectual peer. You demonstrate that you are deeply invested in the long-term macroeconomic realities of their sector, and you leave them with the undeniable impression that you are the most sophisticated, high-yield investment opportunity of their entire fiscal year. You have now mastered the art of locating hidden capital, extracting it through forensic accounting, shielding it from institutional displacement, and dominating the corporate interview process to secure legally binding financial commitments. You have successfully acquired the funding necessary to step onto a university campus without signing your life away to a federal loan servicer. However, the educational finance industry has one final, devastating trap waiting for you the moment you arrive for your freshman year. Securing the capital is only the first phase of the war. Maintaining that capital over a 4-year academic life cycle requires an entirely different operational strategy. Right now, nearly 50% of all students who win massive private scholarships lose their funding entirely by the end of their sophomore year due to deeply hidden renewal clauses, predatory grade point average traps, and minor administrative technicalities that foundations use to legally revoke their money. In the next phase of this masterclass, we are going to dissect the brutal reality of scholarship retention, and you will learn the exact auditing framework required to protect your funding from being clawed back by the very institutions that awarded it to you. The mathematical reality of higher education finance is that signing the initial award letter is not the finish line. It is merely the opening sequence of a 4-year operational compliance campaign. When you secure a lucrative, multi-year renewable scholarship from a private foundation or a corporate entity, you are not receiving a no-strings-attached philanthropic gift. You are entering into a highly specific, legally binding contract with a massive financial institution. Historical trends regarding scholarship attrition are absolutely staggering, revealing that nearly half of all students who enter their freshman year with fully funded private packages lose a significant portion, or the entirety, of that capital before they even register for their junior year coursework. The institutions that disperse this wealth are governed by strict boards of directors who expect a continuous, measurable return on their investment. If you demonstrate any sign of academic liability or operational inefficiency, they possess the contractual authority to immediately terminate your funding, plunge you directly back into the predatory student loan market, and redistribute your allocated capital to a more compliant applicant in the next academic cycle. To prevent this catastrophic financial outcome, you must deeply understand the precise mechanisms of scholarship displacement, beginning with the most common and statistically devastating trap, the predatory grade point average threshold. Imagine if a college freshman named Emily, currently enrolled at a highly competitive public research university in this year of 2026, successfully navigates the interview process and secures a $25,000 renewable private grant from a national aerospace defense contractor. She steps onto campus believing her financial future is entirely secured for the next 4 years, allowing her to focus strictly on her coursework. However, buried deep within the fine print of the foundational contract is a seemingly standard renewal clause mandating the maintenance of a strict 3.5 cumulative grade point average. During her first semester, Emily is forced to take a notoriously difficult organic chemistry prerequisite, a class specifically designed by the university to weed out underperforming students. She studies relentlessly but ultimately receives a high C in the course. Despite maintaining perfect grades in her other 3 classes, the mathematical weight of that single C drags her cumulative grade point average down to a 3.4. The aerospace contractor does not care about the difficulty of the professor or the steep learning curve of her freshman transition. They operate entirely on binary metrics. When Emily submits her official transcript at the end of the semester, the foundation immediately triggers the revocation clause, legally clawing back the remaining $75,000 of her projected 4-year funding package over a mere decimal point. This is the brutal reality of the grade point average trap. To mitigate this extreme risk, you must implement a strategy known as defensive academic mapping. Before you even register for your first semester of classes, You must calculate the exact mathematical margin of error your private scholarship contract allows. You cannot blindly register for highly volatile, heavily weighted courses in a single semester. You must strategically balance your academic schedule by pairing historically difficult prerequisite courses with lower-risk elective credits to mathematically insulate your cumulative grade point average against a sudden, unexpected drop. Furthermore, the risk is not exclusively tied to your grades. It is heavily dependent on the velocity of your academic progression. This brings us to the second major mechanism of funding termination: the credit hour velocity requirement. Private foundations and corporate endowments base their financial projections on a standard 4-year graduation timeline. They explicitly allocate funds expecting you to enter the workforce and contribute to their industry within 48 months. Therefore, almost every single private scholarship contract includes a hidden clause dictating the exact number of credit hours you must successfully complete every single academic year. If a university considers 12 credit hours per semester to be the minimum requirement for full-time student status, a private corporate foundation might legally require you to complete 15 or even 18 credit hours per semester to maintain your funding. If you drop a single class mid-semester to protect your grade point average from falling below the required threshold, you might mathematically save your GPA, but you simultaneously trigger a default on your credit hour velocity requirement, resulting in the exact same catastrophic loss of funding. You are constantly walking a razor-thin contractual tightrope. Beyond academic performance and credit velocity, you must also navigate the treacherous landscape of major declaration and industry alignment. As we discussed in previous phases of this masterclass, corporate entities fund students specifically to build a future talent pipeline for their own industries. If you secure a massive grant from a regional agricultural cooperative because you intend to study agronomy, but you decide during your sophomore year that you want to switch your major to graphic design, your funding will evaporate instantaneously. The agricultural cooperative is not a charity. They are an agricultural business. The moment your academic trajectory misaligns with their corporate objectives, your contract is fundamentally breached. You must intimately understand that when you accept industry-specific capital, you are legally locking yourself into that specific academic corridor for the duration of the funding period. If historical trends of your own academic interests suggest you might want to pivot your major, you must strategically prioritize securing capital from decentralized community trusts or localized memorial foundations that do not tether their money to a specific corporate sector. The final and perhaps most frustrating method by which students lose their funding is through sheer administrative negligence. Private foundations operate on extremely rigid fiscal calendars. They require annual impact reports, updated official transcripts, proof of continuous full-time enrollment, and frequently mandatory attendance at annual foundation galas or corporate networking events. These organizations do not send multiple polite reminders to your student email address. If the contract stipulates that your official transcript must be uploaded to their portal by 11:59 at night on May the 1st, and you upload it at 8 in the morning on May the 2nd, you are in breach of contract. They will use that minor administrative technicality to immediately sever the financial relationship. To combat this, you must build a comprehensive compliance dashboard. You must extract every single deadline, every reporting requirement, and every mandatory event from your scholarship contract and map it onto a rigid digital calendar with multiple preemptive alerts. You must establish direct, professional communication with the foundation director, routinely updating them on your academic progress long before the official reporting deadlines. You are actively managing a corporate relationship, ensuring they constantly view you as a reliable, highly compliant asset. By utilizing defensive academic mapping, understanding credit velocity, maintaining strict industry alignment, and executing flawless administrative compliance, you can successfully shield your private funding from contractual clawbacks and ensure the capital flows uninterrupted for your entire collegiate career. You have secured the money and you have learned how to keep the money. But the most dangerous financial trap in the United States higher education system does not come from the University Financial Aid Office, and it does not come from the private foundations. It comes directly from the federal government. The mathematical illusion that scholarships are entirely free money is about to be completely shattered. If you do not understand the highly complex, deeply punitive tax laws surrounding massive financial aid packages, the Internal Revenue Service will reclassify your educational funding as standard taxable income. You could successfully win $80,000 in private scholarships, pay for your entire education, and then receive a devastating, mathematically crippling tax bill from the federal government the following spring, completely destroying the financial freedom you just spent years trying to build. In the next phase of this deep dive masterclass, we are going to completely deconstruct the hidden tax liabilities of scholarship funding, and you will learn the exact accounting frameworks required to legally shield your capital from the Internal Revenue Service before they audit your educational windfall. The greatest misconception perpetuated by high school guidance counselors and university financial aid offices in the United States is the blanket assumption that all scholarship money is inherently tax-free. This is a mathematically dangerous oversimplification. The Internal Revenue Service views your educational funding through a highly specific, legally rigid lens outlined in standard tax codes. To the federal government, a scholarship is only considered tax-free capital if it is strictly utilized for what they officially designate as qualified education expenses. This is where the legal definition becomes absolutely critical for your financial survival. Qualified education expenses are strictly limited to tuition and the mandatory fees required for your enrollment or attendance at an eligible educational institution. It also includes books, supplies, and equipment, but only if those specific items are explicitly required for every single student enrolled in your specific courses. If your funding pays for these exact items, that money is entirely shielded from federal taxation. However, this is precisely where the trap snaps shut on millions of unsuspecting students every single year. Historical trends show that the most lucrative private scholarships, the massive corporate endowments and full-ride community trust grants we have been analyzing, frequently disburse capital that far exceeds the base cost of tuition. They intentionally provide excess funds designed to cover your on-campus housing, your university meal plans, your travel expenses to and from the institution, and general living stipends. According to federal tax law, every single dollar of scholarship money applied to room and board, travel, optional research equipment, or living expenses is legally classified as unearned taxable income. It is treated by the Internal Revenue Service exactly as if you had clocked into a job and earned a standard paycheck, except you are not having any taxes automatically withheld by an employer. You are receiving raw, untaxed capital, and the government expects their percentage during the spring tax season. Imagine if a university junior named Elias, studying civil engineering in a major metropolitan area in this current year of 2026, executes the geographic isolation strategy flawlessly. Elias secures a massive $40,000 annual grant from a regional infrastructure coalition. His actual university tuition and mandatory fees only cost $25,000. The university bursar office legally applies the first $25,000 to clear his tuition balance, and then issues Elias a direct deposit refund check for the remaining $15,000 to cover his campus apartment and daily living expenses. Elias assumes this is simply the ultimate reward for his strategic hard work. He uses the capital to pay his rent, buy his groceries, and fund his academic year. What Elias fails to realize is that the university is legally required to report this financial transaction to the federal government using a specific document called Form 1098-T. When January arrives, the university sends a copy of this form to the Internal Revenue Service and a copy to Elias. Box 1 of the form shows $25,000 in qualified tuition billed, but Box 5 shows $40,000 in total scholarships administered. The Internal Revenue Service computers immediately detect a $15,000 mathematical discrepancy, because Elias did not proactively set aside a portion of that $15,000 to cover his future tax liability, and because he did not file the appropriate tax returns declaring that excess scholarship money as gross income, he is suddenly hit with a massive unexpected tax bill, complete with severe underpayment penalties and accumulating interest. The very funding that was supposed to liberate him from financial stress has now trapped him in federal debt. To completely avoid these catastrophic potential outcomes, you must operate your scholarship portfolio exactly like a corporate chief financial officer manages a business ledger. You must institute a rigorous, heavily documented accounting framework the exact moment any private funding enters your bank account. The foundational step of this framework is absolute financial segregation. You must never allow a university refund check or a direct scholarship stipend to be deposited into your primary personal checking account, where it can mingle with your standard savings or part-time job income. You must open a dedicated, entirely separate educational holding account. When excess scholarship capital is deposited into this specific account, you do not spend a single dollar until you have executed a precise tax liability projection. While educational channels cannot provide official personalized tax advice, Case studies of financially successful students demonstrate that they immediately consult with a certified public accountant or utilize advanced tax projection software to calculate the exact estimated tax burden on their non-qualified scholarship funds. They then immediately transfer that projected tax percentage into a high-yield savings account, functionally locking it away until tax season arrives. You are essentially acting as your own payroll department, manually withholding your own taxes to guarantee you are never caught off guard by a federal audit. Furthermore, you must aggressively track every single academic purchase to mathematically maximize your qualified expense deductions. The burden of proof falls entirely on you, not the university. If you use a portion of your scholarship money to purchase a $3,000 high-performance laptop, the Internal Revenue Service will automatically consider that a non-qualified, taxable expense unless you can legally prove it was a mandatory requirement. Your defense mechanism is the course syllabus. You must physically download, print, and securely archive the official syllabus for every single class you take. If your advanced architecture seminar explicitly states in writing that a specific high-rendering laptop is a mandatory requirement for course completion, that $3,000 purchase instantly transforms from a taxable liability into a tax-free qualified educational expense. You must maintain a strict, digitized forensic paper trail consisting of every university bookstore receipt, every mandatory software license invoice, and every syllabus requirement for a minimum of 3 years after graduation. When you sit down to file your federal tax returns, you do not simply plug in the numbers from the University Form 1098-T, because that form is historically notorious for failing to capture the full scope of your actual qualified expenses, such as the textbooks you purchase from an external third-party vendor. You must meticulously reconcile the university data against your own forensic ledger, legally maximizing your deductions and shielding every possible dollar of your hard-earned capital from taxation. By implementing this elite accounting framework, you successfully neutralize the final systemic trap of the educational finance ecosystem. You have systematically located the hidden regional wealth, forcefully intercepted the massive corporate endowments, professionally negotiated against the predatory university displacement policies, dominated the high-stakes boardroom interviews, contractually protected your funding from academic clawbacks, and legally shielded your residual capital from federal taxation. You have completely dismantled the entire trillion-dollar student debt machine. But knowing how to execute these individual tactics is only the foundation. To truly scale this operation and guarantee continuous, massive funding for the entirety of your undergraduate and potential graduate career, you must learn how to connect these isolated strategies into a fully automated, aggressively repeating systemic machine. In the final phase of this definitive masterclass, we are going to build the ultimate operational command center, teaching you how to treat your educational funding not as a desperate one-time scramble, but as a streamlined, highly efficient corporate enterprise. The transition from a desperate high school senior hoping for a financial miracle to a sophisticated university scholar operating a fully funded academic career requires the implementation of a rigorous, highly mechanized tracking system. You must stop viewing scholarship applications as individual, isolated chores that you complete on a Sunday afternoon. You must begin operating a personalized customer relationship management database, treating every single community foundation, private trust, and corporate endowment exactly like a corporate sales pipeline. Historical trends in philanthropic funding clearly demonstrate that students who systematize their application process secure exponentially more capital than those who rely on brute force and frantic, last-minute essay writing. To build this ultimate operational command center in this current year of 2026, you are going to leverage free, highly customizable relational database software to construct a centralized, automated funding dashboard. The first critical step in building this machine is constructing your primary target ledger. You will not rely on scattered sticky notes, disorganized digital folders, or chaotic browser bookmarks. Your database must contain highly specific, meticulously categorized columns for every single entity you identified during your localized geographic audit and your tax return investigations. You must log the official name of the organization, the exact philanthropic mission statement you extracted from their annual reports, the historical award amount they typically distribute, the definitive application deadline, and the highly specific contact information of the foundation director or trust manager. But the true power of this operational command center lies in the implementation of automated chronological triggers. You must engineer your database to automatically alert you 90 days, 60 days, and 30 days before a specific application window even opens to the public. This gives you a massive chronological advantage, allowing you to proactively update your modular essay components and secure necessary letters of recommendation, while your competition is completely unaware that the funding cycle has even initiated. Let us observe the potential outcomes of this systemic approach through a highly specific case study. Imagine if a university sophomore named Chloe, studying biomedical engineering in Florida in 2026, decides to stop writing individual scholarship essays from scratch. Instead, Chloe uses her operational command center to build a modular narrative engine. She understands that while every foundation has a unique mission statement, the core structural components of her value proposition remain identical. Chloe writes 3 master narrative blocks. Block 1 is a deeply technical, quantified breakdown of her current laboratory research regarding synthetic tissue engineering. Block 2 is a macroeconomic analysis of the aging population in Florida and the impending strain on the regional healthcare system. Block 3 is her definitive, 5-year career trajectory outlining how she intends to commercialize her research to lower local medical costs. When her database alerts her that a regional medical technology grant is opening in 30 days, Chloe does not stare at a blank word processing document. She simply extracts these 3 pre-written, highly polished narrative blocks, seamlessly stitches them together, and writes a highly customized 2-paragraph introduction explicitly linking her modular narrative directly to the specific mission statement of that exact Florida foundation. By utilizing this modular narrative engine, Chloe effectively reduces a brutal 10-hour essay writing process down to a streamlined 45-minute assembly sequence. This is the exact mechanical leverage that allows top-tier students to submit 40 to 50 highly competitive, hyper-targeted applications every single academic semester, without sacrificing their actual grade point average or their personal mental health. You are manufacturing scale. You are transforming a low-probability individual application into a massive, diversified portfolio of highly probable financial targets. But the operational command center serves an even greater strategic purpose once the rejection letters inevitably begin to arrive. The amateur applicant views a rejection letter as a definitive failure and immediately deletes the email. The professional applicant views a rejection letter as highly valuable, actionable market data. When you receive a rejection, you immediately log that data point into your centralized dashboard, but you do not discard the target. Historical trends reveal a fascinating psychological vulnerability within private foundations. They are frequently managed by the exact same local board members year after year. If you apply for a highly competitive local civic club grant as a freshman and you are rejected, you must utilize your database to trigger a strategic follow-up protocol. You wait exactly 6 months, and you send a highly professional, completely unsolicited update letter directly to the committee chair. You thank them again for their initial consideration, and you provide a heavily quantified, strictly professional update on the exact academic milestones you have achieved since they last reviewed your file. You inform them of your updated grade point average, your new leadership roles, and the specific technical skills you have acquired. You are not asking for money in this letter. You are demonstrating relentless, undeniable forward momentum. When the application window officially opens again for your sophomore year, your database alerts you to submit a new application. When that committee chair sees your name for the second time, you are no longer a random applicant. You are a known, highly professional entity who demonstrated massive resilience and executive follow-through. Case studies consistently show that foundations actively prioritize funding students who reapply after a rejection, because the act of reapplying demonstrates the exact type of long-term commitment and grit they are desperately seeking to invest in. Furthermore, your operational command center must be heavily deployed to manage the foundations that actually award you capital. As we discussed regarding scholarship retention, you must never allow a relationship to go cold after the check clears. You must use your database to schedule quarterly touchpoints with your private donors. You send them brief, highly polished reports detailing exactly how their specific financial investment is directly enabling your academic success. If you use their funds to purchase a specialized piece of engineering software, you send them a screenshot of the digital rendering you created with it, explicitly thanking them for making the project possible. This level of hyper-professional stewardship practically guarantees that if the foundation possesses discretionary funds the following year, or if they decide to expand their renewable programs, your name is the absolute first one brought up in their board meetings. You are transforming a one-time financial transaction into a multi-year, highly lucrative corporate partnership. You now possess the complete, unrestricted architecture to fundamentally rewrite your financial destiny. You understand how to bypass the massive, practically useless national databases and aggressively isolate the hyper-local community capitals sitting idle in your specific geographic radius. You have learned the exact digital reconnaissance methods required to intercept massive corporate endowments by aligning your academic trajectory with their urgent workforce shortages. You possess the highly advanced, completely legal forensic accounting skills to extract the tax returns of invisible private trusts, exposing their mandatory distribution quotas and securing funds with virtually zero public competition. You know exactly how to anticipate and ruthlessly negotiate against the predatory scholarship displacement policies of massive university financial aid offices, effectively shielding your private capital from institutional theft. You have mastered the architectural framework allowing you to engineer mathematically undeniable application essays that force review committees to view you as a high-yield corporate asset. You are fully equipped to dominate high-stakes boardroom interviews, utilizing narrative dominance to secure legally binding financial commitments. You understand the critical mechanisms of defensive academic mapping and absolute administrative compliance required to maintain your funding across a 4-year timeline. And you know how to deploy rigorous tax accounting protocols to shield your educational windfall from federal audits. Finally, you have the exact blueprint to build an automated, scalable operational command center to manage this entire process as a highly efficient, perpetually repeating financial machine. You have the map, you have the tactics, and you have the systematic engine required to graduate completely debt-free. But what happens when you decide to push even further? What happens when a 4-year undergraduate degree is no longer sufficient for your intended industry, and you suddenly realize you need to fund a highly expensive medical degree, a prestigious law program, or a rigorous doctoral fellowship? The landscape of graduate-level funding operates on an entirely different dimension of corporate strategy, involving fully funded research stipends, aggressive departmental bidding wars, and massive federal training grants that actually pay you a comprehensive salary to attend school. The tactics you learn today are the foundation, but to unlock the absolute highest echelon of institutional wealth, you must learn how to manipulate the graduate ecosystem. In the next deep dive, we are going to completely expose the shadow market of fully funded graduate programs, and you will learn exactly how to force elite universities to not only waive your tuition entirely, but actually pay you a competitive living wage to conduct research inside their facilities.